All right, welcome to this episode of the Small Bike Stuff podcast. My name is Callum. I'm here in New Zealand, and we're with my friend
Dana, out here in Bangkok.
Yeah, I'm not jealous. It's okay. I'm pretty sure I say this every episode.
Every
This is the Small Bike Stuff podcast where we explore the ins, the outs, the intricacies, and the oddities of the world of small bikes. We've talked about a lot so far this season, and this is actually the final episode. And why not send it off with a bang? Probably not the right term here. We're going to talk about electric bikes,
Yes.
and specifically, is it the future? And I guess, I could sum that up really quickly and say whether we like it or not, it's going to be, and end the episode here. But I think there's a lot to unpack. I've worked for an electric bike company. You live in Bangkok, where electric bikes are becoming more frequent and common. So it is an interesting topic, and I want to preface it by I hate going into the different Facebook groups I'm a part of, and any time someone posts something electric, there's just a whole bunch of old wounding humans like, I don't like it. I don't care. If you feel that way, that's cool. I'm not an evangelist for electric bikes, don't get me wrong, but I'm also not so closed-minded that I make hating them my whole personality trait.
Yeah, like that's one of the things I noticed too, especially, I think we're in a lot of the same groups, so we see like a lot of the same posts. And there are people who just have these visceral hatred to electric bikes for no reason, what I can tell. I mean, why would you hate a bike that has better acceleration, is faster, is cleaner, is cheaper to operate and maintain? Like, where's the downside here?
I agree. I agree with you entirely because, I've ridden quite a few different brands. There's some brands I really respect out there in the world of electric bikes.
And there's some bad ones.
There's some terrible ones as well. And there's some interesting stories there. There's a lot of startups that have been created, which we'll get into soon. There's just last week, as we're recording, so when this will come out, I don't know, it will have been a while ago, but Van Moof is an electric mountain bike company. And they raised, their big claim to fame was they'd raised the most amount of capital out of any e-bike company globally. They raised $128 million in the last few years, and they just went bankrupt as of last week. So
not
there's a lot of
for a startup, though. I mean, that's not
no.
I've spent a lot of time in the startup world. Like, that's not uncommon.
Yes, in fact, the place that I worked, that we'll get into as well. I don't want to say they're in their death throes, and I wish anyone well. I'm not the kind of person who's vindictive. Just doesn't who wants people to fail. I want everyone to succeed, but. With my personal insights and looking at the way things are going, there's some tricky times ahead for some companies, especially with the way the world's going. And, in New Zealand, just on a non-electric motorbikes tangent, but like all vehicles have kind of stagnated its sales at the moment. Houses aren't selling as much as quick as they used to. During COVID, there was this big period, 2020, 2021, where everything you could, like, if you had a truck and you wanted to sell it, you're getting an extra 10, 15 grand than what it was worth easily. Yeah. And New Zealand doesn't play, just for the Americans at home, New Zealand doesn't play the whole dealership markup thing. Like, that won't fly here. Whereas in US, if you've got some really sought after models, say like it's a new Mustang, they've only brought out 2,000 of them in this calendar year. Yeah. And some dealerships will last an extra 20, 30, 40 grand. That's not a thing here. So to see things selling for above value was wild, but that's boom. Slowed right back down. So, I mean, that's a reflection in I guess what, if you're an e-bike company, what you make and what it's designed to be used for. If it's just kind of like a fun thing that people would buy as an afterthought to have some extra fun with on their camping trips on the weekend, that might kind of be lower on their priority list.
I think that's absolutely a market for some of this. Like, when we talk about like what is an e-bike good for, like an electric dirt bike, especially if you had something that had a swappable battery pack or something that had like 4 hours of runtime on it, and you could just go out into the mountains or take a camp in and go, tearing it up on the trails, that'd be epic. But also from the other side, the commuter bike, right? It's like the perfect fit. And I think back to when you were in Bangkok and we were at Clubhouse together. This is the first time I had seen this. You had experienced this before. But this girl pulls in with her scooter, with the grab box on the back and everything,
I
pops
think
her
it's a
seat.
Honda Bentley, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, but it has like it has like a weird logo on the side, like Winnebago or something like that.
Yeah.
But she pops the seat, pulls out two batteries, throws them on a rack, and then goes over with her app and opens up the machine, the charger, and pulls out two batteries, pops them back in, and takes off quicker than I could get gas on my bike, right? And you explained to me like, oh, it's like a whole system. You pay a subscription and you get to charge, and it's this whole thing. And the bike was dead quiet. No, yeah, it looked like basically like a chubby version of a Scoopy, right?
Yeah,
Which isn't a bad thing necessarily. I'm just saying it's not
Yeah.
the bikes I like to ride, but though I do enjoy the Scoopy quite a bit. But that being said, like, she's using that for work. She's making deliveries on that. So maybe she swaps those batteries 3-4 times in a day. I don't know. But
it's really interesting.
If you're commuting in the city, right, how perfect is an EV if you're in the city?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of one of the big topics I want to come to is, if we talk about different locations in the world that do or don't use e-bikes, like first thing that comes to mind for me when I started to notice that electric stuff was becoming more prevalent was back in, I think it was 2008, the Beijing Olympics. The Beijing had terrible pollution, and for they put an embargo on like fossil fueled vehicles for like 60 days or 90 days leading up to the Olympics, and they actually made some permanent laws as well that like most internal combustion engine small motorcycles are not allowed in the populated centers of China now. It's almost exclusively electric scooters, and we all know the different kinds of things that can come out of China. It depends on the people that are getting it made. If it's a Western brand going in with their rules of how they want things to be designed, you can get some really high quality stuff.
Yeah, standards and practices go a long way.
They do. And just in saying that, there's also, dozens of companies that probably produce a couple of thousand cheap little e-bikes a year that if they had one accident, they'd be bent in half. But there's places like that have a lot of e-bikes. Vietnam was one thing that stood out to me as well, is petrol's definitely king there, and it will be for a very long time. Same with most Southeast Asian nations, I would say. But there are these, like, they can only go about 30 or 40 kilometers per hour. And I think if you don't have a license, like you're a younger person, you can ride these, and you'll see a lot of school children, teenagers going to high school on these electric bikes that have like a newspaper delivery rack on the back that they always put someone else on. So they don't use it for newspapers, they use it for people. And you'll see these zooming around. And yeah. And I found that really interesting. I also saw a few electric like pickup 3-wheel tuk-tuk things that definitely came from China.
I see a ton of electric tuk-tuks here in Bangkok as well. A lot of hotels or apartment buildings own them and use them to shuttle their guests or their residents around.
Well, that's a perfect use case for it because, if anyone watching hasn't been to Bangkok, if you go to Bangkok and you stay in a condo or an apartment that's 2 or 3 streets back from the main road where there's a train station, generally they'll have a tuk-tuk, and it's always coming back to base. It never goes anywhere except from its reception to the BTS station. So every time they come back, plug it in, good to go.
And actually, there's an electric tuk-tuk company here in Bangkok now as well. Bit limited on their service. You've got to basically only have like designated pickup points, and they only operate in certain zones, so you can only take it within that zone. But they're quieter than traditional tuk-tuks. They're more comfortable to sit in because they have 6 full-size seats in the back, and they're clean. Yeah,
it's a big thing as well,
and cheap.
Yeah, if you've sat in Bangkok traffic in an LPG tuk-tuk on like it's sunset, stuck in the 5 p.m. traffic, and you've just got this LPG smell just wafting in, and you start getting lightheaded, and you're like, man, I enjoy getting lightheaded, but not this way.
And also, like, if you're a bigger lad like Callum and myself, and you try to get in the back of a tuk-tuk, you realize that the seat is only about like maybe 15 centimeters from the floor. So your knees are up in your chest, right? And the back is only like maybe 30 centimeters tall. So your spine's like kind of bending at a weird angle. Whereas the electric ones that they have for the service now, you jump in that, it's got a full bucket seat, 6 of them, or 4 and then 2 jump seats. And they're comfortable, they're clean, you've got a normal seating height. It's very nice. But I still love the traditional sort of like Skylab tuk-tuk looking things.
Yeah,
but
I do. I want the MBK tuk-tuk. I know it's not petrol, but at MBK there's a stretch tuk-tuk with like 800 seats.
Yeah.
I've always wanted it. I don't even know if it's like workable or they push it in and out every day.
I can't imagine. I cannot imagine that's navigable in the city.
No, any corner, just scraping the side, no matter what happens.
No matter what.
It'll be horrible. New Zealand and USA, because those are our direct experiences from our country. Although, arguably, you've been in Thailand way too long for electric bikes to have been a thing in the USA when you were
there was like they were like Walmart scooters is what we would call them in the US back in the day. When I lived in the States, I say back in the day, it's been a decade, but my only experience with American EVs or electric bikes comes from YouTube, right? So, and like mostly watching like insane mods, like taking a Zero and retrofitting it into a Grom. Like that level of experience with EVs. So my full experience with electric bikes has been in Asia.
Yes, and I mean in the States, the one thing some people might think about when they think about electric bikes in America is the Harley-Davidson Livewire, which is now its own company, which is a weird move. I'm not going to judge that. I think that's a whole nother episode. But that was interesting because I have always followed Charlie Bouman and Ewan McGregor's bike trips around the world.
Yeah, me too, of course.
Yeah. I mean, who are we talking to?
And come on.
If you're watching and you haven't seen those, turn this off.
What's wrong with you?
They their last trip for me was a bit of a dud personally. So they went from Ushuaia down in the south tip of South America to California, and they were going to use a whole bunch of different things. The first 2 episodes is them figuring the trip out. Usually the first episode's figuring it out, and the second one they're into it. And then right at the end of the episode, they have this kind of prospect that, hey, Harley-Davidson's about to have these live wires ready. We can be the first ever people to ride an electric bike from, Ushuaia to California. And they did it, and it was okay. The bike wasn't the issue. It was just like trying to charge a high capacity electric motorcycle that's capable of, well over 100 kilometers an hour, probably 100 mile an hour. Yeah. And you're trying to charge it on some little poor Argentinian's village's solar supply. Yeah. And they'd plug their bikes in and wake up in the morning and none of the village had power anymore. And the bikes weren't charged.
And they were bringing in diesel generators at one point. Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of caveats. That was probably the worst of their trips it was the most interesting from an EV perspective and from just a logistical perspective, but it was also the most disappointing in that they sort of set out with this premise and their cameraman's riding a Harley that.
Yeah, Sportster, NF3 or something.
Yeah, and then they've got they had the electric trucks and they kept dying and there was a lot of. It was interesting, and I appreciate
there's a lot of limitations.
Yeah,
which defined the trip. So,
and for me, that's you and I both like long distance small bike touring. That's kind of like something we both kind of are passionate about. And EVs are not there yet for that, or electric bikes are not there yet for that. And at least in Thailand, there's no big build out network of battery swaps or rapid charging stations that we could really make use of. There is a guy on YouTube talking about Livewire. There was a guy on YouTube. I saw his shorts popping up for a while. He was driving from, I think, Florida to Sturgis on a Livewire.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And, stopping to charge along the way. And a lot of the videos were I got 2 miles left. I can't find this charger, So there was a lot of interest. There's still challenge from that regard. And, I remember when Livewire really became announced, I was living over here. And there's a bunch of guys who I used to work with when I was in telecom who are Harley guys that weekend warriors, go out on their bikes on the weekend, ride around, play MC.
Yes.
Like a cosplay as an MC on the weekend type of thing. And I remember when the live wire was announced, the absolute visceral which they would post about it, like, oh, this is just a publicity stunt. They'll never make this as a production bike. Thankfully, this is a horrible idea. It has no soul. Like they and like I don't mind. The thing is, like I've ridden Harleys. They're okay. I don't mind them. I don't love them either. But I'm also not like I'm not married to the idea of like a rumble coming from my bike. And I like as a small bike guy, like I usually I leave my stock exhaust on. I want it sort of as quiet as possible. I want to enjoy the ride, not go deaf. But I kind of dig what the Livewire did as far as like it did kind of sound cool as an EV. It looked cool as an EV, and it did have that Harley aesthetic in a way that I appreciated, while all the Harley people I know absolutely hated it. They think it's like sacrilegious.
I would argue that Harley did the world of electric bikes and other companies a favor because they kind of had the marketing budget to force that in front of more people than probably would have otherwise cared or would have learned about it on their own. And I get that. Like, I mean, the whole USA opinion about Harleys, I get it, and a lot of Americans probably won't understand what I'm about to say, but people that don't come from America don't really care if their Harley's made in America or not.
Yeah.
We don't care at all. There will be outliers. There'll be old boys that like, it's American brand, but it's like, bro, you're from New Zealand. Like, what? Why do you need your Harley Davidson to be made in America? There was a Harley Davidson India factory for a while, and they made the Street 500, which is a 500cc learner bike we had in New Zealand, and then they make a lot of, like, if you go to any Harley dealership in New Zealand now, they're all made in Thailand, and you can see it on the down tube. And I don't have a problem with that, but I think that was a connotation of, they're changing what we've always known. But I mean, before I get too distracted with the world of internal combustion engine bikes, one country and brand that has my utmost respect in the world of electric bikes. And I will preface this by a small rebuttal with, I do like noise from my bike, but not on a long distance trip. I've done long distance trips with my loud pipes, and
you also did a long distance trip with your bearing making more noise than your exhaust. So
yes, that's true. That's true.
It is what it is.
Yeah, but it's after 8 hours of riding with a loud pipe, you've got like tinnitus at the end of the day, and it's just not ideal. Gogoro is a brand, or Gogoro, from Taiwan. And they are arguably the battery swapping pioneers. So Gogoro, I think, I always thought it was like a semi-rolled R, but apparently it's not. They've been around. I think it's just Gogoro. Yeah, they've been around for quite a long time now. About 10 years at least. And
they do mapping, right? They map rider style to battery profile.
Yeah. So long story short, if you and I go to Taiwan today and we go and buy a Gogoro scooter, we walk into the dealership and it has a battery, but there's no charger. You don't get a charger with the bike. They've got battery swapping stations all around the city. There's actually more battery swapping stations in Taiwan now than there are fuel stations.
Really?
And yes, and generally you'll have your phone open with an app. You don't have to, and a lot of like older boys as well. I don't like apps. Why do I have to ride my bike and use an app? But the app will just instantly direct you to the nearest swapping station. You walk up, and as you would pay with your phone in some countries, you just scan your phone against the machine. It says, "Oh, hi Dana, how are you? Are you giving me 2 batteries or 1?" And you'll click 2 or 1. And then it will highlight 2 holes on the battery wall. You put them in there, and then it will pop out 2 batteries that have been charged specifically for your riding style.
Yeah.
So if Dana's always wide open throttle and hard on the brakes, and I'm cruising along really gently everywhere at 30 kilometers an hour, they get all that information because they personally charge the batteries themselves. And that's one step above. And some people want like the not the surveillance aspect, but like the lack of anonymity. Anonymity. I can't even say
anonymity.
Anonymity. Thanks.
You just need a bit of coaching to get through it. It's a tough one. I'm lucky. I got it right. I got it right the first time. Like complete fluke.
English comes from America, so I mean,
330 million people speaking it makes it the right version.
Yeah, okay, if you say so. My
I do.
Microsoft Word's still on UK.
You got to get
But
rid of those U's, buddy.
yeah, I'm sorry, man. The impressive thing about that is that they capture all that technology. No other brand does that.
Mm.
No other brand has all of the data about your riding style and your usage. And I think that gives them an immense leverage in the research and development department, because they can take that information and be like, hey, 80, hypothetically, I don't really know what the information is, but 80% of people never actually use their brakes because the regen is so good. So we could make like a slightly lesser quality brake component, or the opposite. Everyone uses their brakes so much, so maybe on the next models we need to kind of make it this style instead of that.
I would argue that I like their bikes. I like what they do, but everything's a step through, right?
Yes, it is.
That's my biggest. Why no underbone?
Because they're only designed for Taiwan, or they were designed for Taiwan.
Yeah.
And I mean, everyone that has done any research into Taiwan and motorcycles, you will have seen a photo or a video of like 400 million scooters leaving this bridge. It's a little overpass in the center of Taipei. I think there's a photo, they posted a photo of when they first started, and there's like one Gogoro there at the front. And they took a photo recently in the last like 18 months. And I think like 40 to 50% of the bikes in that traffic are Gogoros.
So they're great bikes. I just like I agree
with what you're saying.
Underbone fans, right? So it's like
but it's
hook a brother up.
I completely agree. I get why they do it, because they're only really trying to they're marketing the people that don't really care. They're not marketing to you and me that are like, I want the coolest like looking bike that's got the best engine. They're like, this works.
Well, it's also like here, right? Like underbones are the most popular bike in Thailand is an underbone, thankfully. But it's like a semi-auto, air-cooled, like it's still a great bike, right? Wave. But like 90% of what you see model-wise are step-through still, because they're more comfortable to ride, they're more accessible, right? They're easier to get in and out of. There's benefits to them.
I've always wanted to, since I found out about Gogoro, and there used to be this really good video on YouTube, but it's been removed, and I don't know why, but it was like the Tesla of motorcycles was the title. And there's this guy who was in Taiwan elegantly explaining the company, but it's no longer there, and I always tried to link people to it. They've got enough charging stations that you could do a lap of the island, I'm pretty sure.
I remember you telling me that, and
not charging, swapping stations.
Yeah, swapping stations. Yeah. Now, are there charging options for the bike? Like, can you buy a charger separately to charge at home, or is that not an option?
I don't think it's an option. I really don't think it's an option. There's no, from what I see, plug, which most other bikes have. These just slot into a perfectly designed little hole in the battery swapping wall.
So to me, the upside of that is that it simplifies it and reduces costs for the buyer. The downside of that is you're now also stuck in the same cycle of a petrol fueled vehicle, whereas you need to plan to go home with at least one battery charged, or you have to plan around that. Whereas to me, the beauty of an EV is if you have battery swapping, that's epic. You can swap it out, you can go and ride, but you're in a rush, you want to go home, you get home, you plug it in, you kick back, have dinner with the family, you're good to go. You're sort of missing out on like that duality.
If I was to quantify, I agree with you. I think if Gogoro was as popular in Thailand as it is in Taiwan, to put it into perspective, they've got 11,000 swapping stations. I think over half of those are in the capital. On your soi, Bangkok and Bangkok, where you go down, between where you get to the turn off to your little side street and the main road of Sukhumvit, I would argue there'd probably be 15 swapping stations or 10 swapping stations, because they just put them outside of corner stores. It doesn't have to be at a big gas station.
Like there's literally huge. 8 7-Elevens on my little soy, right? So as there are in all little soys in Thailand. And they're actually probably more than 8 if you count all the little side soy 7-Elevens. But so there'd be a lot, but I'm just saying, like, you're still like, it's still that same fueling station mentality / system in place. So, whereas Yeah.
I think that it only works. That's another argument with Gogoro. I love them. They will never come to New Zealand. They will never work in New Zealand. We have 4.5 people spread out over the same size as Japan or the same size as UK, like landmass wise, and it's just not a thing. We don't have the population density buildup. Gogoro, I watched an interview with the CEO a while back, and he said, like, we're not actively pursuing any market that doesn't already have a dominance of over 50% of people riding motorcycles every day. So, like, India's sweet. Singapore, they've started to go there now. They're in Jakarta now, I think, as well. But like
Bangkok's going to be on their list. Ho Chi Minh's going to be on their list, right?
Yeah. But I mean, we're not. Like, New Zealand won't be. We don't have the population density, and even if we do, there's not enough people riding bikes.
So Singapore is going to be an interesting one for. We've talked about Singapore on this show before. The cost of vehicle ownership in Singapore is staggering. So to bring, one, this is interesting from the perspective that everything in Singapore is expensive, and including fuel.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So having a EV, unless they're somehow able to bring these there and they're not licensed, like the same way those little stand-up scooters are not in Singapore. That's why so many people have them. But we know that motorcycles do require a permit to purchase there. So would these fall somewhere in the middle, or do they have a model specifically for Singapore that is maybe a little different?
I honestly don't think they do. I mean, looking at their website now, they've got like 12 different models that are arguably 3 models. And they've just got slightly.
I think they're one model with like different body. It's in battery capacity.
They do have a version that will go over 100 kilometers per hour, which is something that's positive.
That's nice.
The battery life on that is supposedly between, like, they say 100 kilometers an hour, 100 kilometers range. I think if you're going 30 kilometers an hour, you get like 170 to 180 to.
These all have like 10-inch wheels on them.
Yeah, a lot of them do. They do it like a beefy one.
Yeah, but still 100.
It's like 12. It's 12-inch wheels.
100 kilometers on a 10-inch wheel. I mean,
I've done worse. I've done them on 8, but no, it's not fun at all. I think where are they? They say at the moment they're in 9 countries, and they've got 47 different vehicles they offer.
47. So there must be something like for Singapore. Like it wouldn't make sense to me to.
If you scroll down to their, if you go on their homepage and you scroll down, they've got this little graphic where it says 47 different vehicles. You can see a lot of just different variants. One of them's a trike, like a delivery trike, which I'm quite excited about. I think that would probably be the most fun. And then one's this little bony, like not really a proper bike spec looking thing that wouldn't surprise me if that was popular in Singapore. There is a bigger one that looks like it's got 13 or 14-inch wheels as well, and that's like room for 3 or 4 people. But
they've got a great time lapse of the charging station on their site as well. If you go to the
do.
Yeah,
it's aesthetically pleasing as well as being useful. Oh, look, there you go. They're in Israel, India, China, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Philippines, Singapore, and Indonesia.
I think this is a great model. I mean, I think they have like a Muji collab as well, which I think is hilarious. Like I don't know if like Muji's a thing like in New Zealand. I don't think it is in the US, but
no, it's not.
It's like a great like minimalist Japanese brand. I have a lot of Muji stuff. I'm a fan, but I was going to say. Well, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the interesting thing is if you scroll down below that graphic there, and one thing that I hadn't mentioned and I did mean to mention is they've got all these different brands listed that they work with. PGO, Yardia. Yardia is one of the biggest Chinese motorcycle manufacturers that exist. Yamaha. Just all these different brands. They all have taken Gogoro's battery technology under license and are putting them in all sorts of models.
Nice.
So that means that hypothetically there's inter-brand swappability possibly in the future. Cool. Yeah, because otherwise, it's like when every different phone manufacturer had a different charging port back when I was young, and that was incredibly annoying.
Back in my day, we wore onion on our belt. That was the style at the time.
At the time, yeah. All right, Grandpa. Yeah, I agree with you. So like, there's a lot of good points that come from that. Unfortunately, it wouldn't work in my country. The technology could be utilized with those removable batteries if you could
but the
charge them at home.
density doesn't really support it.
No, it doesn't. I mean, we've got another brand I want to talk about, New, N-I-U. So New electric scooters. I did a little bit of a review on them. Got into a bit of a battle with the New Zealand distributor, so I need to watch my words. But they
legal battle?
No, not legal battle. What him and I thought would come of me using a bike for 6 weeks were two different things.
Ah, gotcha.
And I ended up not enjoying it as much as I thought I would. Therefore, I didn't make a dramatic amount of content about it because I don't like being... I don't like lying just because I said I'll do something. You know, if I genuinely didn't... It wasn't bad. There's like build quality, incredible. It was really well built. There's like no external finishings on the thing, so it's just smooth. And you know, the one I rode would go up to 80 kilometers per hour. They have a faster version that will do a bit more than that. They used to have batteries under the floorboard, which I loved, with an optional second battery under the seat. But this one had no under floorboard battery, and all of the underseat storage was taken up by batteries. Whereas a lot of the Gogoros have minimum of 20-25 liters of underseat storage.
I know you're an underseat guy for sure. I know you love that.
I shared a story on my Instagram today of these Indonesian guys making a brew of like grape flavored milk like drink under their seat of an NMAX. They filled it up with ice and they poured water in and sachets. And,
that's disgusting.
I was like, I need to do that. Yeah, it'd be horrible, but I want to do it. New have these cool bikes, and they all throughout China. They're in New Zealand. They're in quite a few different countries. I saw them in Bangkok. There's a few Grab delivery drivers using them, so they've got a pretty cool prevalence in the world, and they exist here. And the whole way they're sold is like, hey, buy an extra battery. And you have the charger at home, and you always have a battery charged. So it works in a smaller density.
What's the range?
That one was about 80 kilometers it would do on one charge.
That's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, when you went into full power mode, what I didn't like about it is it had 3 power modes. They had Eco, Normal, and Boost along those lines. Eco, understandably, wouldn't go faster than 30 kilometers an hour, super gentle acceleration, heavy regenerative braking. Normal was normal. Boost still didn't give you everything it had.
Gotcha.
You can tell that Boost was still designed to save as much battery as possible. And it's like, heck, you've got this really powerful Bosch motor, really good quality motor in there.
What was the wattage on it?
I think it was 3,000 possibly. You know, it would have been capable of upwards of like 100 kilometers an hour. And even if it couldn't go 100, the acceleration that thing could provide, I know for a fact, because I've ridden some home-built bikes with Bosch 3,000 watt engines. And you can just boom and be gone. But I guess they're trying to make it safe. Another thing is,
safe.
if you've got the front brake on, it won't spin the rear wheels, so no burnouts on the spot.
You talk about safe. I'm sure if you heard this clip on it's going around Instagram of a comedian saying like if you described a motorcycle to someone today who had never heard of it, they'd think you were insane. Like I'm gonna. It's like a car but with 2 wheels and you're sitting on the engine.
And there's no safety whatsoever. If you come off, you are the airbag.
So I think we'd be remiss to talk about EVs and not mention like the homebrew scene around EVs. Like you mentioned, some people with some Bosch motors in their homebrew, and then sort of like the evolution of the homebrew, which I'll mention, they don't exist anymore, but Shanghai Customs.
There's a few aspects to that, and I agree. One thing that I think leads people into that is brands like Suron, which do the little e-mountain bike, dirt bike, mini dirt bike things. I've ridden one of the latest reels is me doing a quick wheelie on one. That thing was impressive and had a swappable battery and could do 70 kilometers an hour. And the power output was like, heck, I can't wheelie, but that thing made me look like I can do one. And that was it. All I had to do was sit in front of the camera 4 times and pick the one where I'm not falling over.
Yes.
And those have fostered a huge following, especially in the US. There's a whole YouTube channel of a guy who just literally he vlogs while wheeling one, and he gets on the back wheel and stays on it for like a whole battery, and just like, today we'll go. There's a gas station. Don't have to stop there, and you can modify them. So you can buy more powerful motors. You can buy kind of uprated bits, controllers, and stuff like that, and that's awesome because for a lot of people, like me. Before I came into motorcycles, all I could do was an oil change. I'd never pull an engine out or do anything like that. But, it gave me the ability to learn. And I think this gives people the ability to learn because just making your own electric bike, like that scares me.
Yeah.
Because batteries.
Well, I've welded battery cells before. I mean, if you have the device to weld it, and you understand, like as long as you're careful about the alignment, right, you'll be good. Otherwise, you'll burn your city down. But
that's what I would do.
There's no middle ground. It's like, oh, you're good, or you've caused a disaster. But the reality is, like I've seen bikes here, like old, like Sonics or old like Waves with like 3,000 watt motors laced into the back wheel, and like homemade batteries dropped under the seat or in the frame somewhere. And you can do quite a bit with something like that, and obviously charging is challenging, but or not as you don't have the quality of charging that you would with like a production vehicle. But then there was like a company like Shanghai Customs that for a while made a kit specific to the Super Cub that you could swap. And I think it was a really short range type of kit given the aesthetic of the bike. They were trying to fit everything under the seat. So it's like the controller and the battery, everything was under the seat where the tank would be, which I think was only like 4 liters of space. So
less.
Is it less than 4 liters?
Like 2.9.
Yeah, so it's not a
tiny.
ton. Yeah. That's probably the biggest limitation of the Cub and variants.
They had a really amazing idea, but it worked on the premise that everyone kind of was a little bit understanding of how building things worked. So they had a kit that would bolt on to a certain kind of Honda Cub frame. So it wasn't a Honda Cub standard frame. Standard frame is the one where the whole tank assembly unbolts off, and then you've just got this downslope. Whereas the deluxe frame, which they designed the kit to work with, has this permanent tank structure that you pull a tank out of the top. So there are 2 different styles of Honda Cub frames, but they had the same engine mounts, mostly. There were a few of them that came out with a slightly different engine mount pattern because they had a different engine. And a lot of people were just using old frames that had like original Honda motor and then 3 Chinese motors wedged in and out of it. And then they try to go bolt these things on and something will be 1 or 2 millimeters out. And you'd see some people being like, nah, it doesn't fit. And so you get... I couldn't imagine being the customer service department there because you would have dealt, with stuff that you or I would have just been like, oh, sweet, get a rubber mallet and give it a bit of a tap.
Yeah.
Perfect. It fits.
Or just like, hey, let me grind this off and cut a new one and weld it on and it'll be a perfect fit. Yeah.
But that's, when you advertise something as a plug and play bolt on kit, you instantly set yourself up for a bit of failure.
But let's be honest, nothing with a motorcycle is plug and play.
No,
ever.
Not really.
Even,
and they
even factory
if it
parts.
is, you've been deceived.
Yes.
Something's going to break later on.
If it goes in too easy, I'm worried.
Yeah. They sold quite a few of those. There's a guy in Wellington, New Zealand that bought one. I think he made his own battery pack because he couldn't get one shipped over. They just faded out kind of a bit before COVID. They kind of became less active on their socials, and then during COVID it 100% ended. I found a blog post the other day after you kind of asked me about them, and a guy gave his review. He installed it with their battery. It was a guy in the US, and he said, like, it's not a terrible kit, but
it leaves
if
a lot
you run
to
it
be
full,
desired.
if you run it full power for a while, like as soon as the battery drops below like 70%, it won't go full speed anymore. Little things like that. Sometimes the display would kind of turn off when it got too slow, when it lost too much battery power. So little things like that. And they've actually decided to do a completely different thing. They've got a company called Switch Motorcycles now, same people. And they're designing probably arguably one of the most attractive looking actual motorcycles. It's kind of like a cafe racer looking thing. I think if you look at Switch Motorcycles on Facebook, it's been pushed out. They were meant to have their original models out now, but and people have pre-ordered. Like you could pre-order for $500. It's cost 12,000 New Zealand US, 12,000 US.
I don't mind that bike at all. I think it's fine. But and actually, one thing I will say about Shanghai Customs as well, they clearly had an eye for aesthetics, because the original Shanghai Custom that was based off of that Super Cub, the way they designed the finish looked fantastic with the strip down, like the naked body, like the ones they would show were clearly, fit and finished, right? Nice paint jobs, like custom leather seats, like everything about it was quite nice. But I've read the same things that, like, the controller had a lot of finickiness to it. The display wasn't fantastic. And, some of the things like I've seen people do otherwise, though, with similar bikes, like even here with the Wave, I've seen people take the Wave and do mods to make it an electric, like a commuter bike. And, that they look great. Obviously, they don't have the same fit and finish. There was something clearly, like someone from that team was clearly more design focused than engineering focused.
Yeah, I think they've done the right decision with their new. So it's the Switch e-scrambler with their new bike, because that's been delayed due to them not. You've got all these incredible factories throughout China that can make anything and everything. Then you've got some factories that aren't so great.
Yeah.
When you're only wanting a small run of product, it's hard to get in
manufacturing.
Hard to get manufacturing from at a good quality level. They've delayed this bike a couple of times now because they, couldn't get things how they wanted them. And you look at that frame, and they've engineered it. By looks, it looks amazing. I'd love to see how it actually is in real life. And supposedly, because the founder's from New Zealand, there will be a dealership about an hour and a half from me that will be getting a demo. So I really would like to give that a go. 70 kilometers range, I think. What was it? 150 kilometers of range, 160 max speed, kilometers per hour, around about the equivalent of 70 horsepower, and it takes 4 hours to charge.
Now, one of the things that they still have is still a very aesthetic look to this. It clearly has like that sort of like 1960s scrambler look to it. I'm not a huge fan of those bulbous tires. Like I much would prefer to see something with more modern tires. I prefer to see alloys on a bike, especially since it doesn't have a hub motor. Like there's certain things like that, like I would prefer personally, but it definitely fits the aesthetic. So I still think there's a strong design element in their company, but it also seems like maybe they've taken engineering to another level or elevated it a bit with this model.
I just hope it lives up to how it looks, because at first glance you're like, not bad. But when you jump on it and ride it, I mean, as soon as you get on a new bike, within the first couple of gear changes, you're like, yeah, or nah.
Well,
really,
quick. And there's that was me with my my Yamaha. Like right away, I was like, okay. This is more than my Grom. You get that right away. But there's some other things, like I think a lot of people don't understand, like when you're building a bike or modding a bike, even there's like things like the physics of a bike that, a little like how the handlebars are oriented or what the shock dampening is make a big difference in rideability. And I think the fact that these guys had some experience with the customization of the Cubs and with the Shanghai Customs approach, that they're probably in a better position to take this step than they were previously.
Yeah, there's another bike that came out recently. I can't think of the name, but Zach Kortz did a review on it from Revzilla, and it's kind of like a similar brushed aluminium look, but the bike that people crowdfunded and put deposits down on, like the battery's not removable like it was in the advertisements. They haven't been able to get that down, and so now it's an enclosed battery that you can't remove, and so they've changed a few things along the track. It's interesting to see what different companies do, because I used to work for a company that's called Ubco. They have a low speed 2x2, yeah. So like other than that, you've got the Rokon, which is a Briggs and Stratton powered thing with like 400 chains that somehow drive the front and the rear wheels.
Would you consider that like a farm bike or a ranch bike in New Zealand?
The Rokon, yes, but the Ubco was designed by farmers. So I know the founders. I became quite good friends with one of them, and he's got no longer anything to do with the company at all. But which was all news to us, very mysteriously. But he designed it based on the fact that he really liked electric vehicles. He'd been into e mountain bikes and stuff. Grew up on a farm riding Honda CT90s, and that was kind of his like, hey, if that was designed today, but electric, and what would it be? And so they made a demo product and took it to like a local agricultural festival. And they came first place in like this innovation competition.
Nice.
And the company that kind of ran the competition helped them scale it into a sellable product. And the first years of the company were incredibly promising. They've got this 2-wheel drive bike that kind of was okay. They turned it into like the next generation, the first public release, which is all right. But they discovered like issues with cable replacements going down onto the motors, and they changed that so that was more reliable for servicing and stuff. There was water ingress in certain things. The range wasn't as good. They improved the range, sorted more power out. And the final version that they've got now hasn't changed since 2019. That came out in 2019, and all that's been done since then, with a lot of capital raise. Well into $50 million US worth of capital been raised, and really all that's been achieved is a new color and a new set of brakes. The mechanicals of it are all exactly the same. Now, they could, because I haven't been there for a while, they could be on the cusp of something really cool they're about to release. Who knows? But there were lots of plans, just like this other brand that Zach Courts had reviewed. They were going to do this and going to do this and going to do that, and the reality comes and sets in.
All those things are expensive.
Actually, yeah, it's hard to do, which I guess it's a startup thing as well. And I think this next thing I'm about to say is relative to startups. There's nothing to do. I've stopped talking about the company I worked for. I'm now talking about startups. Startups
not in violation of my exit agreement.
Startups in all industries can produce some cool stuff, but there's equally, and something that I learned for the first time was that there were people that were just kind of career jumping through startup to startup to startup, because generally you get quite a good wage because they've got all this funding. You don't have the job security going forward because you don't know if it's going to work out or not. But like generally they'll move to cool hip areas. The company will be in a cool, nice place, and you kind of have there's a whole lifestyle aspect. And that was that's something that I found that there were certain people in the company that were doing incredible stuff and producing these incredible things behind the scenes. And some people were just like, yeah, I get to live in a beachside town and work for a cool place.
This is true if you go through LinkedIn, like I know a ton of people, like I said, I spent quite a bit of time in the startup world. And there's a lot of people who their whole resume, like even you'll see on Google, they're like you'll see on LinkedIn, they're like former Google, former Grab, the former Apple, like former, Uber or whatever. They'll put that on there as like their title in their resume because they want to show like, hey, I worked for this big startup. Like here in Thailand, like former Agoda is like you'll see a lot of people who worked for Agoda previously throw that on their resume, or Grab, which, may very well indicate that you did some cool things there, or may just very well indicate that you were brought on as part of a big hire. So,
yes,
that is a thing. And some people over rely on that versus, showing the value of their work previously.
A lot of people kind of like, I learned so much about a different side to the world of business, being involved with one, and like you say, they're going through a big hiring period. I didn't realize that companies, when they've been given a whole bunch of investment, but the product isn't able to be released as quickly as they thought they would, they need to show progress to their investors somehow. So they'll just go hire a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And then you've got all of these extra people working on this extra stuff. But and that kind of did happen. And then there was also the inevitable, not inevitable, but there was for me, that the goodbye.
And that happens.
The services are no longer needed
to a lot of people. And I mean, to that point, like I have a friend who worked for Apple for like a decade plus in the States, and did some really cool things with them, led some really big projects. And just that being on his resume definitely opened opportunities for him when he moved overseas. Right.
Awesome.
And so like that is a real thing, and people do try to collect that. Like I know a lot of people who like spent years just trying to get into Google specifically so they could quit after like a couple of years and say, hey, I'm a former Google guy, and land a cush job at a smaller startup. So like that's a big thing. That's a big part of it. Same thing happened here with Grab when Grab kind of blew up.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will be like, "Oh, I'm a former Grab person," and like they'll throw that up there.
Logo acquiring. That's what they're doing.
But also, like the thing to think of, like with especially with a motorcycle startup or any type of vehicle startup, you can like as an engineer myself, right? You can prototype and build out anything as an individual unit, and the real challenge becomes taking that idea, that concept, that prototype to scale. You know, like if I wanted to like go out into my garage now and start like my own electric bike company, modifying one-offs of Honda Waves or Super Cubs or anything, I could do that. And I could build one at a time, and it would be built amazingly well. The build quality would be fantastic, and I could sell those. And if I could sell them at a profit, who knows? But like you could build something that you could sell and be proud of, right? Yeah. The second I want to make 10 at a time or 5 at a time, the challenges of that production become exponential. And so absolutely. Those are things that a lot of startups face, that I face that in startups as well, from different products that we've rolled out that like, hey, okay, we built it, we've prototyped it, we've tested it. Now we have to move it out at scale. And then you realize all these additional challenges that exist. And I think a lot of bike manufacturers experience that same thing, and some have dealt with it very well, right? We look at, I think Harley, their manufacturing background obviously made it so that they could deal with that quite well. And the live wire, in my opinion, even though I think a lot of people call it a failure, it's very much a success. I think Gogoro as well has shown that they've overcome that with the mass appeal of their product. Whereas Shanghai Customs, not so much. Zero, not so much. So there's both ends of the spectrum very prevalent.
A couple of brands that I'll just run through quickly, because if I go in depth about these brands with the amount I have here, as we have over the last few brands, this will be a 4-hour episode. But so there's the Harley Livewire. Interesting thing that's been released lately by Honda. There was always a 3D render of an electric Honda Cub floating around on the internet for years.
They released it in China, right?
Well, before that, there was always this render, and everyone was to get released by like Indonesian or Malaysian websites like every 8 months. Like, look, Honda's designing a new, and it wasn't. It was just some design student made this cool render of an electric Cub, and then we actually got these. We've got them for sale now in New Zealand. It looks like a Honda Cub, but it's not. It's just some Chinese brand that made one based off that render. I'm convinced, because they're virtually the same. And then last year, or started last year, they announced for the Chinese market only an E-Cub, an E-Dex, and an E something else. But they all have pedals. They're very low power. They can only do 30 to 40 kilometers per hour. I don't think they count. They've got the names of historic models that changed the world of small bikes, but it's not something that really is a realistic bike. Like a little pedal assist thing that says it's a Dex is yeah. I can put a logo on myself and say I'm a Dex, it's not that hard. So that was a cool one. Gogoro, we've talked about. Ubco. Cake is a Swedish brand, I believe, and they produce the most IKEA looking, and I don't mean that in low quality. I mean that as it looks like a piece of IKEA furniture. Yeah. It's impressive to see how well they've done, because they've got quite a bit of investment. They're like right in with all these global causes. They have their own, they donate bikes to safari ranges to make sure they can get rid of poachers, and they do all these kind of different things. Some of their bikes have popped up in Ukraine. Some of their bikes have they had their own race series to like launch one of their bikes, and I've ridden a couple of them. They look cool. Price point is just so high. Anything petrol equivalent, it's half the price. So they will struggle at that point until costs can come down. But they're an interesting company.
Always a challenge, right? With in a new product as well, and batteries aren't cheap. But I think you've got to look at. I mean, obviously, in my market in Thailand, initial price is a big thing, but long-term cost of a vehicle as well is something.
Yeah, I completely agree. Cake, Alta don't exist anymore. Alta Motors were interestingly enough, were almost bought out by Harley Davidson. So they came around in 2010, and by 2018 they were gone. They had this brand. They released a few bikes. Fort9 did a really good video on them, but it was like, why electric bikes didn't work or why this brand didn't work. And they kind of got to a point where I don't think, there's only so much capital you can raise before you either need to start making money. And I don't think they were at that point. So they tried to get acquired by Harley. Harley said yes, then 6 months later said no. Can-Am or Bombardier, they almost took them over and then they said no. And then boom, 2018, they closed. So that was in production. There's still Altas out being used in the world at the moment. We talked about Suron and Nu. Stark Varg. Have you heard of the Stark Varg?
I've not. That's one I don't know.
Okay. Stark, S-T-A-R-K, and then Varg, I think, might have 2 A's. This is a bike that's just had its first production models produced. And it's kind of marketed to be like an aggressive dirt bike. As you see it, if you look at the photos of it, 80 horsepower, weighs 120 kilometers, 120 kgs, sorry, 938 newton meters of torque onto one wheel. That's
insane.
A lot.
That's insane.
That's insane. And it's got different power modes. By all accounts, you can make it like, I want to have a 85cc two-stroke kind of level power. I want a 250 four-stroke power. I want a 450 four-stroke level of power. And those are the kind of power settings you've got. So if you fit the bike, you can put it on your riding style, I guess. And those have just started to come into the world now. So I haven't really looked into them too much, but the specs were impressive, and there seems to be a lot of furore. But everyone just wants to know, are they as good as they are saying they're going to be? So yeah,
I think
cool.
the world of, to me still, I think we can't deny that electric bikes are the future. Right, in some regards, like I don't think it's going to happen overnight. We obviously see it's a much more gradual process than I think anyone who's offended by the thought of electric bikes is going to be offended for a very long time until their petro loves are gone. And ultimately, I think there's going to be something for everyone, just like there is in the motorcycle market now. There's going to be an Africa Twin equivalent. There's going to be a Harley equivalent, and there's going to be the Super Cub equivalent. And we'll all find a happy medium. And I think, like I said, my biggest concern, probably yours as well, is the range and the touring ability of an electric bike. But I think eventually that won't be an issue.
I agree.
So I look forward to the day where I don't have to go to the gas station. I can do 1,000-kilometer tour swapping batteries along the way, because even in small town Thailand on the border with somewhere, there's a battery swapping station where there used to be those little petrol stations that sold glass Coke bottles full of petrol that with a saran wrap over the top with a rubber band that you would pop off and fill your tank up with. So yeah, I'm confident in those things, and I look forward to that future.
I'm down with it. Yeah. I agree. I don't get upset by the thought. I do think that I'll probably keep a petrol bike forever. Like if I have my 2015 Honda Wave in 2050, I'll be pulling it out to show the grandkids. Like, look, this is what we used to ride.
Actually,
and
I hope I can swap out. Let's say I have my Exciter 155 for 50 years. I hope that I can swap that engine out to a crazy electric setup.
Yeah, and I mean there's that point. Just like people can get a stock Tesla and beat a myriad of supercars. It's just it's a different piece of technology, and there's a lot that can be done. I think we could keep talking about this forever. There were some other things. The only other things we hadn't brought up that I think we've kind of covered by proxy were I was going to bring up the F word, fire. But I think that's just a technology thing.
The controllers do explode. I mean, that's a thing.
It's seen, and it's generally seen with brands that are like, I haven't seen any Gogoro fires. Let's put it that way. So yeah, I don't think that's a problem that'll be around forever. Firefighting departments around the world are having to figure out different things. I saw a picture the other day where instead of trying to put out a Tesla that was on fire, they got an excavator in, dug a Tesla-sized hole, filled it up with water, and pushed the car in because it was still burning for hours.
Yeah, and
I think
the batteries, obviously, the lithium ions can be an issue. But from a user perspective, from a rider perspective, I would much, much rather be sitting on a bike that catches on fire than inside a car with a seatbelt on that catches on fire.
Yeah, bikes for the win. Absolutely, I completely agree. Look, it's something that I hope we are able to do the trips that we like to do on electric bikes, within a reasonable amount of time. And I think it's getting that way. Honda, I think it was Toyota just announced, like they do every 5 years, that they've got some fantastic new technology they're coming up with to do with batteries. There's cobalt batteries, cobalt-free batteries, and so there's just a whole bunch of stuff happening, and I think we just have to wait and see.
Between nanotechnology, different element distributions, and all of these different technologies that we don't even know about at this point, right? That there will be capacities and charging speeds that are beyond our wildest dreams at some point. So that's just the way technology is. You can't say never. So no, I'm excited.
Same here. And I think before we keep talking about more of our wildest dreams, we should probably end it here. So,
yeah, I agree.
Thank you so much for joining on this season of the Small Bike Stuff podcast. We will probably be recording another one by the time you are watching this one.
Let's hope.
So, or listening. Although, you get to see our faces for like 45 minutes to an hour if you watch it. So, I mean, what more could you want?
What else could you ask for?
Yeah. Please give us feedback below and let us know what you think. And just kind of, if you've got any topics you want covered in the world of small bikes, we're more than happy to cover them. If you think that we didn't cover things correctly in a topic because we missed a whole facet of some specific subject that we should have talked about because it would have changed the whole thing,
let us know. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Let us know.
Yeah. I didn't say I'm going to do anything about it. I'm just interested to see how wrong you are. No. Anyway, we've got to go, and we'll see us again soon, and it'll be cool if we can film a few of these in person together when I'm over in Thailand.
We absolutely will. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, that's it. See you later. Bye.